The story you're about to hear isn't made for headlines. It wasn't shouted from rooftops or broadcast live for the world to see. In fact, it began in a way that most of us would have walked past, unknowing. But for one man, in one moment, the veil between the visible and invisible world lifted, just long enough for his camera to catch something divine. This is the story of a Eucharistic miracle. Not ancient. Not buried in some dusty church history book. But recent, raw, and caught on a smartphone. The miracle, as it stands, is still under quiet review. And as is often the case in matters of the sacred, the Church urges discretion. So we've changed names. The location, too, is kept private for now. But the images? The images speak for themselves. It happened on a humid July evening, July 9th, 2022 to be exact. In a mid-sized town nestled in the U.S. Midwest, a youth conference was coming to its end. Hundreds of teenagers and volunteers had spent the past 3 days immersed in talks about faith, community service, confession, healing, and the Eucharist. The closing night was simple: Mass, followed by a time of Eucharistic adoration and benediction. For many, this was just another part of the retreat schedule. For others, it was a chance to encounter something deeper, perhaps even healing. The event took place in a school gymnasium temporarily converted into a sacred space. Folding chairs had been set in neat rows. A wooden platform served as the altar. White and gold fabric draped the edges. Candles flickered beside the monstrance that would soon hold the consecrated host. And in the back row, a 42-year-old father named Mark stood quietly with his teenage daughter. He wasn't a theologian. He wasn't even particularly devout. But his daughter had begged him to volunteer, and so he said yes, more to support her than out of his own belief. As the worship music softened, the lights dimmed. The priest, an elderly man known simply as Father Thomas, walked forward with the golden monstrance held carefully in both hands. The host, now consecrated, sat at its center like a silent, living sun. What happened next would leave everyone in that room changed, but only one man would see it with his own eyes and lens. As Father Thomas raised the monstrance, inviting everyone into silent adoration, Mark felt an unexpected pull to lift his phone. It wasn't to text. It wasn't to scroll. Something urged him to record, a simple instinct, the kind most of us feel when trying to capture a memory. At first, what he saw through his screen seemed normal. The priest. The altar. The soft, golden glow of the candles. But then, the light changed. Slowly it began to brighten, not just on the screen, but in real life. A pale white shimmer surrounded the monstrance, pulsing faintly, like breath. Mark blinked. Rubbed his eyes. Was it a camera flare? A trick of lighting? He lowered his phone. The shimmer was still there. He lifted it again. The glow intensified. And then, just as the music faded into complete silence, the light changed shape. It became like a flame, not flickering, but steady. Not hot, but warm. It rose above the monstrance like a silent, white fire, reaching upward and then folding inward. The gymnasium remained still. Hundreds of teenagers knelt in prayer. No one else moved. No one else reacted. Mark held his breath. He took a photo. Then another. And then, just before the final blessing, he captured a short 10-second video. In it, the flame could be seen distinctly. Rising. Folding. Pulsing. And then, gone. Just like that. After the benediction, Mark turned to his daughter. "Did you see that?" he whispered. She blinked at him, confused. "See what?" "The light. The flame. Around the Eucharist." She shook her head. Others around him began to stretch, stand, gather their things. A few lingered in silence, but no one spoke of light. Or flame. Or anything unusual. Mark felt strange, like he just stepped out of a dream. He checked his phone, thumbed through the photos. The shimmer was there. The glow. The flame. Not just one image, but several. And the video? Clear. Unedited. Real. He didn't know what to do. So he said nothing. Not yet. It wasn't until the next morning that Mark approached the retreat coordinator, a young nun named Sister Angela. Nervously, he showed her the images. She stared at them for a long time. Then asked, "Who else saw this?" "No one," Mark replied. "Just me. Or maybe just my phone." She nodded. "And where were you standing?" "In the back row. Near the middle aisle." Sister Angela pulled up the event floor plan and pointed. "That angle would have had no direct lighting. And all our overheads were off during benediction. No projectors. No effects. Just candles." They sat in silence. Finally, she said, "You need to speak with Father Thomas." Mark found Father Thomas later that afternoon. The priest was gentle, old, his hands always half folded in reflection. When Mark showed him the photos, the priest didn't gasp. He didn't doubt. He simply stared. Then he whispered, "I felt something." "What do you mean?" Mark asked. "During benediction. When I raised the monstrance, my hands trembled. I thought it was age. Or nerves. But it felt like something was moving through the host. Not from me. Through me." Father Thomas gently tapped one photo. "This light, it wasn't just for you. But you were chosen to see it." Over the next few days, Mark shared the images with a few trusted voices. A theology professor. A local deacon. A Catholic photographer. All of them had the same response. There was no explanation. The flame was not an overlay. Not a glitch. Not a trick of lens flare. In fact, one professional ran the images through a forensic tool for digital tampering. The result? No edits. "These are original files." Another expert examined the timestamps and metadata. All consistent. The images were taken in sequence. No anomalies. So what now? Mark wasn't sure. He didn't want attention. He didn't want to go viral. He just wanted to understand what had happened. Why had only his eyes, only his phone, seen it? And why had the light come at all? The Catholic Church has always held that the Eucharist is not a symbol. It is Christ. Not metaphorically. Not figuratively. But truly, body, blood, soul, and divinity. It's a hard teaching. Even many Catholics wrestle with it. But the Church teaches that every Mass, no matter how ordinary, no matter how quiet, contains a miracle at its center. Yet sometimes, God allows that miracle to be seen, if only for a moment. Sometimes, He pulls back the veil. Just enough. When Mark returned home from the youth retreat, he felt like a man holding a secret too heavy to keep, and too holy to share carelessly. He had witnessed something inexplicable. A flame, not imagined, not symbolic, but visibly captured in photos and video, rising from the monstrance during Eucharistic adoration. No one else had seen it. No one else had felt it. And yet here it was, frozen in his camera roll. 4 photographs. 1 short video. And a feeling that this moment wasn't just for him. But what do you do when heaven whispers, and only you hear it? The following Monday, Mark sat in his car after morning Mass, staring at his phone. The images were still there. Untouched. Clear. And so were the questions. Was it real? Was it divine? Was it for me? He decided to share the video, quietly, with an old friend. Someone he trusted deeply, Dr. Rachel Lynn, a Catholic theologian and former physicist. Rachel was a careful thinker. Rational. Skeptical. But faithful. When she saw the clip, she asked only one question. "Can I run a light analysis on this?" Mark agreed. A few days later, she sent back her findings. There are no anomalies in the video. No overexposure. No digital overlay. And the light source doesn't behave like natural or artificial light. It intensifies but doesn't bloom. It rises and folds unnaturally, as if it has intention. She paused. Then added, "Science can't explain this. Which means maybe it's not supposed to." Rachel encouraged Mark to share the video with one more person, a priest she knew personally. Father David Moretti. Father David had worked with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith during his time in Rome. He understood the weight of investigating supernatural claims. When he saw the footage, he asked to meet Mark in person. They met at a quiet parish chapel just outside the city. No press. No announcement. Just a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a silent tabernacle in the background. "I need to ask," Father David said gently. "Do you want this to become public?" Mark shook his head. "No. I want the truth. And I want to protect what happened." Father David nodded. "That's a good answer." He then explained the process the Church follows when someone presents a potential Eucharistic miracle. Initial validation. The event is documented with photos, videos, and first-hand testimony. Technical review. Experts examine the evidence for tampering or natural explanations. Spiritual discernment. Clergy and theologians review the context, character of witnesses, and alignment with Church teaching. Moral impact. The Church considers whether the event strengthens faith without sensationalism. Final discretion. If approved, the bishop may announce it publicly, or keep it private for pastoral care. "It can take years," Father David said. "Even decades." Mark nodded. "I don't need recognition. I just need to know, was it him?" The priest smiled. "It's not for me to declare that. But let's say this, your experience, if true, aligns with how God has moved in the past. Eucharistic miracles are not common. But they are not new. Over the centuries, there have been documented moments when the veil between heaven and earth grew thin, just enough for human eyes to glimpse what they usually can't. One of the earliest recorded miracles took place in Lanciano, Italy, in the 8th century. A priest, doubting the real presence, watched in stunned silence as the host visibly turned to human flesh and the wine into blood. To this day, the flesh and blood are preserved. In the 1970s, scientific analysis confirmed that the tissue was from a human heart. The blood type was AB, the same type found in the Shroud of Turin. The samples showed no signs of decay. Then in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 1996, a desecrated host was recovered and placed in a vessel of water to dissolve. Instead, it turned into visible flesh and blood. Years later, the sample was studied by cardiologist Dr. Frederick Zugiba. His conclusion? The tissue is from the left ventricle of the human heart, in a state of agony. These stories don't exist to impress. They exist to remind that the Eucharist is not a metaphor. It is not a tradition. It is not a routine. It is Christ. Mark was not a theologian. But he was a man changed. For weeks, he didn't talk about the video. But he watched it. Over and over. Not to be amazed. But to remember. Because every time he doubted, every time he wondered if it had really happened, he had the same answer waiting in his pocket. Light. And not just any light. Light that shouldn't have been there. One night, Mark returned to the parish where the retreat had been held. It was quiet. Empty. He slipped into the back pew. There was no monstrance. No crowd. No music. Just the red sanctuary candle flickering by the tabernacle. He closed his eyes. And asked a question he hadn't dared speak aloud. Why me? The answer didn't come in a voice. Not a vision. Not a dream. It came in peace. A deep, settling calm in his chest. And a gentle whisper, not audible, but undeniable. Because you were looking. In an age of deep skepticism, it's tempting to dismiss miracles. We want proof, but doubt even what is proven. We ask for signs, but suspect them when they come. Yet here was a man, with no agenda, no platform, no fame, holding a photo reel of something the human eye cannot manufacture. And it begs the question. What if heaven has used your camera? What if God knew the only way to reach some hearts was through pixels? Mark was told from the beginning, the Church may never announce this miracle. And that's okay. Because the Church moves slowly, on purpose. She waits. She watches. she prays. And she understands that miracles are not for show. They are not entertainment. They are gentle nudges for those willing to kneel again. So when people ask, "Why hasn't this gone viral?" or "Why isn't this on the news?" the answer is simple. Because not everything holy is meant for the spotlight. Rachel, the theologian, offered one final reflection when she saw the images. Light in Scripture always signifies presence. From the burning bush to the pillar of fire. From the Transfiguration to Pentecost. But this wasn't a fire that consumed. It was a fire that revealed. And then she said something Mark would never forget. In the Eucharist, Christ gives us his body. But what does the body carry? The heart. And what is the heart, if not fire? Maybe you're watching this video right now not by chance, but by calling. Maybe you've struggled to believe. Maybe Mass has become routine. Maybe you've forgotten what's really happening on that altar. But hear this. At every consecration, whether it's in a grand cathedral or a school gym, Christ is there. Not symbolically. Not theoretically. But fully, truly, physically present. And sometimes, heaven lets one person see the fire. So that the rest of us might remember it's still burning. By now, you've heard the story. One man. One camera. One quiet, sacred moment. A Eucharistic adoration. A shimmering light. A flame that rose, not from wax or wick, but from the very heart of the Eucharist. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't special effects. It was captured. On camera. And seen by no one but him. And maybe now, by you. Mark never posted the video publicly. Not at first. He didn't crave attention. He didn't want debate. He only wanted understanding. But news like this, real or rumored, has a way of spreading quietly, especially among faithful circles. A few priests asked to see it. A few youth ministers. A diocesan official. A Catholic journalist. Every response was the same, silence, followed by wonder. No one claimed to explain it. But no one could ignore it either. Eventually, a bishop from a neighboring diocese reached out privately. He watched the video 3 times, then offered a single line of reflection. Even if it's never declared a miracle, it has already worked like one. That's the test of any spiritual encounter. Not the headline. Not the hype. But the fruit. What happened after the miracle? Was faith deepened? Was love rekindled? Was Christ more present in the hearts of the people? In Mark's case, the answer was yes. He didn't become a preacher. He didn't build a YouTube channel. He didn't speak at conferences. He simply returned to Mass. Every Sunday. Sometimes daily. He began praying the rosary with his daughter. He volunteered more often at church. He even went to confession for the first time in 18 years. The flame didn't make him famous. It made him faithful. And yet, the question lingered, why did only one person see it? Why Mark? Why not the priest holding the monstrance? Why not the hundreds of youth kneeling in adoration? Why not the bishop, or the religious sister, or the photographer on stage? Why him? The answer may be the same reason Christ chooses bread and wine, so ordinary, so overlooked. Because sometimes God moves in secret. Not because he's hiding, but because he wants to be found by the humble. Sometimes, the person least expecting the miracle is the one most ready to receive it. The Catholic Church does not rush to label things miraculous. And rightly so. Because true miracles are rare. They are sacred. And they are tested, carefully, prayerfully, slowly. Here's how the Church approaches these events. Scientific verification. Is it truly beyond natural explanation? Spiritual fruit. Does it inspire faith, repentance, and holiness? Doctrinal alignment. Does it reflect Catholic teaching, not contradict it? Moral prudence. Will publicizing it cause distraction, division, or grace? If all of these are satisfied, the local bishop may recognize it as worthy of belief. But even then, Catholics are not required to believe in private revelations, even Eucharistic miracles. Why? Because faith is not based on visions or wonders. It's built on the Word made flesh. On Christ crucified, risen, and present, whether we see the flame or not. If you study the miracles of history, a pattern begins to emerge. God reveals Himself. In Nazareth, to a young woman. In Bethlehem, through a newborn. In a stable, not a palace. In bread and wine, not thunder and fire. And today? In a folding chair in a gymnasium, through a lens, in the quiet stillness of adoration. The method hasn't changed. God speaks softly. Not to overwhelm, but to invite. Not to dazzle, but to draw near. So now the question isn't, did it happen? We've told the story. You've seen the signs. You've heard the fruit. The real question is, what does it mean for you? Have you been drifting? Do you go to Mass but leave untouched? Do you kneel before the Eucharist, but feel nothing? Do you doubt? That's okay. So did Thomas. So did Peter. So do all of us at times. But sometimes God sends fire, not to shame us, but to awaken us. To remind us. This is real. I am here. I love you. The flame on Mark's camera isn't required for belief. But it's offered as a gift. Not proof for skeptics. But hope for the weary. A whisper to the soul that still wants to believe. Eucharistic miracles don't happen because the host becomes Christ. They happen because it already has, and God chooses to lift the veil, just for a moment. To say, I'm still with you. Before Mark shared the photos with anyone, he printed one for himself. Not to show off. Not to frame. Not to post. He folded it. And placed it in his Bible. Right next to John 6 verse 51. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. And beneath it, he wrote one line. The flame was real. But so is he. If you've listened to this story and felt a stirring in your heart, that's not emotion. That's invitation. An invitation to return. To kneel again. To see not just bread, but Christ. To walk into your next Mass not as a routine, but as a reunion. If you haven't been to Adoration in a while, go. If you've never understood the Eucharist, ask. If you've stopped believing, look again. He hasn't left. The tabernacle isn't empty. The altar isn't symbolic. The host is Him. Maybe Mark wasn't the only one the miracle was meant for. Maybe the camera didn't just catch the light. Maybe it caught your attention. So the question now is personal. Will you come back? Not just to church, but to Christ. Will you kneel? Will you look again? Will you let the fire return, not on a screen, but in your heart? Because if this story did anything more than surprise you, if it reached you, calmed you, broke you, or lit something inside you, then maybe this wasn't just a miracle caught on camera. Maybe it was a message. And maybe it was for you. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to someone who's drifting. Comment below and share what it stirred in you. And if you're ready to come back to the altar, He's waiting. And His heart is still beating for you.